Hey, my name is Jim, and I am a collector of Civil War edged weapons. And today we're at Manor College. They're having a Gettysburg Symposium, and I brought a couple of items from my collection which were owned or carried by men who actually served at the Battle of Gettysburg. I have three here, and we can go through them. It's important to talk about their history, being citizens of Pennsylvania who also happened to fight through the war and also at the Battle of Gettysburg. The first sword you have down here was actually carried by a young man from Bethlehem. His name was Alexander Selfridge, who was a nephew of Colonel Selfridge, who was the colonel of the 46th Pennsylvania Infantry. And this is the model 1850 Staff and Field Officer sword he would have carried at Culp's Hill on the day of the battle. Captain Selfridge was the youngest captain in the Army of the Potomac at age 19 and was brevet major at the end of the war. After the war, he moved to Philadelphia, where he lived as a coal agent and eventually died at the age of 78 in 1922 and was actually buried back up at Niskey Hill Cemetery in Bethlehem, PA. And as you can see, we have his history, a letter he wrote, copied, and his name's actually on the monument at Spangler Spring, if you happen to get down to Gettysburg at the Spangler Spring Monument. So that is his particular piece. This saber up here is a presentation sword that was given to, at the time, Major Oliver Nolles of the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry. Major Nolles is an interesting guy, young man, started out as a private. There was a detachment of Pennsylvania troopers who actually went to New York to help form the 1st New York Cavalry at the beginning of the war. Oliver Nolles was a private at that point, worked his way up to lieutenant, and while lieutenant, the Pennsylvania soldiers detached from the 1st New York Cavalry and pretty much were part of the Gettysburg campaign in the Cumberland Valley, interdicting Confederate troops and supply trains. Colonel Nolles had a long history throughout the war, was eventually made major when the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry was formed. When the troops, or the men above him, the colonel, lieutenant colonel, were wounded or killed in action, he was promoted to colonel and eventually became brigadier general at age 23. Unfortunately, he died in Milwaukee in 1866 from cholera and is currently buried at Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. And the third sword is this guy right here. He was Lieutenant Joseph Warford from Bucks County, the 109th Pennsylvania, which was a Philadelphia unit. At the time of Gettysburg, he was a sergeant in Company A, and they were also at Culp's Hill and had a fine fighting record. After Gettysburg, he joined Sherman for his march to the sea, was promoted, and was wounded at the Battle of Atlanta. And honestly, by the time he came back towards the end of the war, the march to the sea was pretty much over. Another interesting history of this guy, twice wounded, once in each leg. And you think that would be enough, but after the war, he actually signed up to be a career NCO and served with the Army Corps of Engineers with the U.S. Army out at Willets Point, New York on Long Island, until his discharge, I believe, in 1889. And unfortunately, he was found dead in Trenton, either died of natural causes or murdered, because his body was pulled out of the river off of Duck Island. He is actually buried out in Morrisville, Pennsylvania, across from Trenton. And along with the saber for Major Nolles, actually Brevet Brigadier General Oliver Nolles, I actually have a memorial book that was written by him, which is extremely rare. It was actually written by Samuel Bates. And essentially, Samuel Bates wrote a book called Martial Deeds of Pennsylvania, of which the only officer that he took that chapter out of that book was for Oliver Nolles. So obviously he thought very highly of Oliver Nolles. Very rare book. I can't imagine there was more than a couple hundred in print. And I was very lucky to find this through a fellow collector who had it in his collection over time.